Humanity has been tracking time for thousands of years, but we got our first wristwatch just over a century ago. Since then, the wristwatch has become one of the most enduring forms of self-expression. But which watches produced in the last 125 years have been the most enduring, and what are the stories behind them? Our list starts with the Cartier Santos, the first modern men's wristwatch. The watch was created in Paris for the daredevil aviator Alberto Santos Dumont in the early 1900s. When Santos Dumont complained to his friend Louis Cartier about the impracticality of using a pocket watch while flying his steerable balloons, the latter responded with a watch inspired by the Eiffel Tower. It had bold Roman numerals and visible screws. Santos Dumont loved the watch, and when it was launched in 1911 as the Cartier Santos Dumont, it also found favor with other stylish men of the time. Up until the early 20th century, wristwatches were mostly made for and worn by women, but Santos Dumont played a key role in getting more men to adopt it. The Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso, our next landmark model, was created for British Army officers who had taken up polo in India and wanted a watch that could withstand the rigors of the sport. The first pieces of the Art Deco style watch, which had a case that could be flipped over, were launched in 1931. It became extremely popular among Indian Maharajas and the rich and the elegant across the world, and has remained on trend in every decade since then. Rolex, the world's most renowned watchmaker, makes several coveted classics, from the Datejust and the Daytona to the GMT Master 2. And then there's a Submariner, one of the world's most recognizable watches. The Submariner was introduced in 1953 as the very first watch to stay waterproof at a depth of 100 meters. Its rotating bezel allows divers to read the immersion time. The Submariner has had many fans, including James Bond. In Dr. No, the first ever Bond movie, the super spy was kitted out with a Submariner. The latest Submariners have a depth rating of 1,000 feet. While it might be categorized as a luxury diver, the Submariner actually comes close to being the perfect all-round watch. Barely 15 years after the launch of the Submariner, the watch industry was reshaped by the quartz revolution. Quartz watches, in which timekeeping is regulated by a quartz crystal which vibrates at a certain frequency, possess unmatched accuracy, and mass production made them highly affordable. The watch that started the revolution was the Seiko Astrum. On its launch in 1969, it cost as much as a mid-size car. But in the following decades, its successors lived up to the Astrum's promise. Someday, all watches will be made this way. The late 1960s also saw the birth of another legendary watch, the Heuer Monaco, which was launched with the world's first automatic chronograph movement. Named after the glitzy Monaco Grand Prix, the Monaco embodied the thrill of motorsport. The watch was propelled to fame after being featured as macho American actor Steve McQueen's watch in the 1971 movie Le Mans, and it hasn't looked back since. No greatest watches list can be complete without the Omega Speedmaster Professional, the only watch to be worn on the moon. In the 1960s, as NASA accelerated its space program and geared up to land humans on the moon, it invited 4 watch brands for flight certification. Only one watch survived NASA's extreme tests, the Speedmaster. In 1969, Buzz Aldrin wore a Speedmaster when he first set foot on the lunar surface, earning it the moniker Moonwatch. The Speedmaster catapulted Omega into the league of big watchmakers. The current and enduring trend of steel sports watches owes a lot to the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. Penned by the famous watch designer Gerald Genta in 1972, the Royal Oak broke away from traditional watch designs of the time. It was the first luxury sports watch made of stainless steel, and it set the template for the sports watch category, influencing brands such as Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin. High-end Swiss watches might be famed for their craftsmanship and technical advancements, but when it comes to toughness, the Casio G-Shock can't be beat. The G-Shock was designed in the early 1980s by Casio employee Kikuo Ibe, who wanted to build a watch with a 10-meter freefall endurance, 10-bar water resistance, and a 10-year battery life. He achieved that by creating a case with a hollow structure that made it difficult for any kind of shock to impact the module. The DW5000C, the first G-Shock, hit the market in 1983, and Casio sub-brand has since sold over 100 million watches, with fans ranging from fashion-conscious teenagers to special ops forces. You'll find a number of watch brands with serious aviation heritage, but IWC has always been among the top guns when it comes to pilot watches. The big pilot's roots trace back to the 1930s and 40s when IWC developed robust watches for military aviators. With its high-contrast dial, big oversized case, and bold aesthetic, the Big Pilot remains the gold standard among pilot watches. The final watch on our list is the Calatrava, Patek Philippe's flagship model and a showcase for its refined aesthetic and technical excellence. Created during the Great Depression, the Calatrava's design is inspired by the Bauhaus principle. Patek has a tradition of making complicated watches and new types of movements, but the Calatrava has long been proof that they are also masters at creating watches that are simple, pure, and beautiful.